My name is Gordon Michael. I'm a conservation agronomist with USDA NRCS. That's the old soil, what I call the Soil and Water Conservation Service. And I work out of Columbia, South Carolina. I'm a native of Sumter, South Carolina. We call ourselves flatlanders down there, so we don't have many hills except for ant mounds or maybe going down in a ditch. But it's a pleasure to be up here with y'all. Lynn asked me to come talk a little bit about soil health, and I told her, I said, this soil health, when you're dealing with grazing, is a lot about grazing management. It's about managing the plants. So you're going to hear a little bit about grazing, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's underneath the soil and how we hopefully can improve that. The common thing you all have, whether you're a gardener or you've got animals or you've got hay fields, is that you can improve the resources you have. You can leave it better than you found it for future generations. So that's what I want to try to get you some information on. And you got some handouts. If you didn't get them, there's some more still up here. You're going to see a few. I hope I didn't give anybody a heart attack. I'm not going to hit all those slides tonight. So there's a few of them in there that are not even in this presentation. There's a few of them that I might have to skip over for the sake of time. Because I think Lynn said I only had 3 hours. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do some traveling around. I had the opportunity to go to Mississippi. My wife is actually from Mississippi, and I couldn't help but take this picture. And for those of you that, I've seen a lot of posted signs and stuff like that that says, it'll say posted, and then it'll say trespassers will be shot and survivors will be shot again. I don't know if y'all ever seen that. But I saw this one. This really caught my eye, and I asked my father-in-law, I said, you got to stop and let me take a picture. It says, prayer is the best way to meet the Lord. I agree with that. And it said trespassing is faster. So that got my attention, and if I see those signs, I generally don't stop. And by the same token, with our job as NRCS, it's a volunteer program. So we're not a regulatory agency. If you want help, then we'll try to help you. Or if you're in another county, we have a district conservationist in your county that'll try to assist. So what I'm going to cover tonight is what is soil health? What are we talking about? Are there any positive or negative effects on the land? What we're doing? Are we having a negative or positive effect? And what can we do to improve on what we have? And this picture right here is actually the same soil type in the coastal plain. I know those of you that are sitting there are saying, that's not red dirt, that's not what we have. That is from the coastal plain. We have a lot of sands down there. And I've been working with a lot of growers that are improving soils in agricultural production, large-scale production field, 500, 1,000, 2,000 acre farms, and they're actually improving the soils on their farm. We knew for a long time we could do it on garden scale or small-scale agriculture, but we're able to do it on large-scale agriculture now in our sands in the coastal plains. That being said, those of you in the Piedmont area, we have a lot more clay. That clay is a lot friendlier to organic matter. So you have the ability, and you have a little bit cooler temperatures here, to improve organic matter even over and above these guys. But this particular soil, like I mentioned earlier, is a loamy sand, and you can see that dark color in there. That's just a visual indicator of a better soil, obviously. If you had to farm on them, or if you were looking at buying that piece of property, you probably want this one. And the only thing that's different is the management of that farm. And I'll talk more about that tonight. So I need to give you a definition. I hope you won't go to sleep on me. I've got a lot of pictures. I'm a visual person, and a lot of times it helps you relate to what we're talking about. But soil health is the capacity of the soil to function. We've been accused of what is soil health? How do you compare a healthy soil to a non-healthy soil? What's that mean? But the main thing is we're focusing on soil function, and over that we're focusing on the biological principles of the soil, the chemical properties, and also the physical properties. Physical being, you've got compaction, you've got physical characteristics that we can't change. We've got chemical properties that we can, some of it we can change. pH is one of them. And we've got aluminum toxicity, and we've got cation exchange capacity, and some of those things we can change, but the biological properties are a little bit more difficult to define, and I'll tell you why in just a second. But with soil health, we're somewhere in the middle of all those. Hopefully we're improving the soil biology, which is going to affect the physical characteristics and the chemical characteristics of your soils. And I'm going to introduce you to these soil organisms that we call microbes. You may have read a magazine article or seen them, but where do they live? They live primarily around plant roots. They're getting sugars and carbohydrates from those plants, and they're in turn giving the plant nutrients. They also live in these pore spaces between these soil aggregates or crumbs. They've got to have a space to live in. So if you've got a heavily compacted soil, that tells me that those microorganisms may not have as friendly an environment to live in. They also live in the litter. If you've got a duff layer, or you mulch your garden, or you've got hay fields, and you've got a layer of litter on the surface, those microorganisms live in that litter underneath there. Water is also a key component to these microorganisms. They have to have water to move around, and that is the backbone of their existence. So we have 50 inches of rain here in South Carolina. We get a lot of water. They're very active. We also have severe droughts. We experienced one of the worst ones we've had in years, if not ever. This past year, where I lived in Sumter's in the central part of South Carolina, we didn't have a lot of water. And so what I'm trying to say there is that microbial activity tends to shut down. And those plants depend on that to survive. So that's one reason why when you get a shower of rain, you see your plants just take back off. Well, that microbial activity kicks back up. You obviously have got water there for your plants. That's part of it. The other part is microbial action is generated, and you're getting nutrients to those plant roots. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I want you to see that this is a complex system. Most of these microorganisms we're talking about you can't see them obviously with your naked eye. You get on up into arthropods and earthworms, you can obviously see those. But everything else beneath the surface, you're going to need a microscope to see those organisms. But they're doing the abundance of the work. And the vertebrates, your livestock or whatever you're raising on the surface, depend on these bacteria, fungus, protozoa, all of these small little microorganisms we can't see, they depend on that. So I put cow-calf pair up there because that's an easy thing for me to remember, but when you're thinking about how much is beneath the surface, how much of these microorganisms, we have to weigh on how much is in there. And bacteria is 2,000 pounds per acre. A ton per acre is what's beneath your feet. Fungus, protozoa, nematodes, and all that makes up these microbes that are helping your plants. And in this case, the nematodes, they could be harming your plants by the same token. There's actually more beneficial nematodes than there are root feeders. Root feeders get all the attention. If you've got a nematode problem in your garden or your crop field, those are the root feeders, but there's a lot of more other beneficial nematodes beneath the surface. Some of the functions of bacteria, I'm not going to go through all these, but one interesting fact, if you like to till, which I do, because I like the smell of the dirt, that is actually bacteria. That is, when you add that oxygen into that soil, you're waking that bacteria up, and you actually can smell it. Or if you smell, sometimes it goes the other way. If you've got a waterlogged soil, it smells like sulfur. That doesn't have a very good smell. But if you've got a good earthy smell, that's bacteria that you're smelling. So back to tie this into grazing and plant management, you've got to have good top growth, but also a good root system to feed these microbes. The more roots you have, the more microbes you can feed, but they're also feeding your plants. There's a symbiotic relationship there. These plants are providing sugars and carbohydrates, and those microorganisms are feeding on that, and they're giving the plant nutrients. Fungus is another one that I mentioned earlier. If you look at how many people in here fish? Okay, you ever open a can of worms and you see little crumbs on top? I like crickets, but some people use worms. Those crumbs on top, a lot of that is a fungus that glues those particles together. And so fungus makes that glomalin here, this is a big word for me to say, but that ties those particles, those little small particles together to make one bigger particle. And that in turn gives you some pore space, so that's important. But fungus also breaks down compounds and makes it available to plants. It also, it's almost like it adds to the root system. And it's this cobweb effect. Here's a tree root, and here's these fungus that are attaching to that root. That's not a bad thing. That plant, that fungus is getting sugars from the root, and it's providing nutrients and water to that plant. That's why we don't have to fertilize our forest. This biology is doing the work for them. As I mentioned earlier, it builds the aggregates and it helps suppress disease and pests. I wanted to highlight this. Fields that have frequent tillage tend to have less fungus. So if you do a lot of tillage in your crop fields or your gardens, some people till up their pastures from time to time. That is invasive, and that'll affect the fungus, but also fields with high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus. And we run into that in crop field situations. If you use a lot of litter, you probably got a lot of phosphorus. You got very high phosphorus levels. Keep that in mind. Why is that important? Well, one, from an environmental standpoint, with water quality, that's one reason why we are. But when you look below the surface, if you have a situation that you're not encouraging this fungus to grow, it can attach to your plant roots. You get drought, that plant's going to suffer inadvertently just from you over applying too much phosphorus. So it's all connected. Nematodes also play a role because they're eating this fungus. And when everything eats, what happens in about an hour when y'all leave here, some people 2-3 hours, y'all gonna probably excrete what you ate. Sorry, this is a fact. That's nutrients. These nematodes are eating on these fungus, they excrete nutrients to the plant. So it's a feeding frenzy beneath the surface. These fungus also trap nematodes. Again, when you kill that nematode, plant nutrients are released. This is a microscopic picture. Little fungus ring, nematode swims through it, it tightens the noose, kills the nematode. So these fungus can help keep those bad nematodes in check, those root feeders that we talked about that are a problem. If you've got a good, healthy soil, it'll help keep those populations in check. Protozoa, we're moving up the food chain. These are a little bit bigger organisms. They're feeding on the bacteria, they're feeding on the fungus, they're in turn releasing the nutrients, and the story kind of goes on and on. You get the picture. A lot of feeding and a lot of nutrients being released. Each one of these groups kind of plays a different role, but I'm not going to go into that tonight. We move on up the food chain. This is the stuff that we can start to see with our eyes. You see millipedes, crickets, stuff like that. Those are the shredding residue, and they're doing their thing on the surface or just beneath the residue. I didn't know this till we started on this soil health thing, but there's actually several different types of earthworms. I'm sorry, I'm moving fast, but I've got a lot of information I'm trying to cover. There's litter dwellers, shallow burrowers, and deep burrowers. Those deep burrowers are actually your night crawlers, and they're not really a native to South Carolina. So I've had a farmer stump me pretty good. He said, "Now what kind of earthworm do I have in my field?" I said, "Good gosh, I've never heard that question before." So I had to go back and do some looking, and I said, well, you've got some shallow burrowers, because we have some litter dwellers here, but we don't have any of these night crawlers. You shouldn't really see a night crawler, I wouldn't think, unless they've been put there and naturally in a field. So some of your arthropods, again, you're moving on up, the old crickets. Some of these you probably had problems with maybe in the past in your turf or in your yard at home, or maybe your hayfield eating plant roots. Some of these can be negatives, but again, there's a lot of other positives out there. This microbial activity is dependent on temperature, and I mentioned soil moisture earlier. So as the summer times, as it starts to warm up, this microbial activity ramps up. What also ramps up in the summer? What's going on in your pastures and your hayfields or your gardens?
They're growing.
Plants are growing, right? What an odd coincidence that the microbes are growing and your plants are growing. That being said, this line is probably not this low in South Carolina. Our microbial activity is almost constant. Maybe on January 28th, when it's -5 degrees outside, maybe it's slowed down a pretty good bit. But how often do we really have those super cold temperatures? And that is the difficulty of building organic matter in South Carolina. one of the difficulties. We've got a lot of moisture. I told you the bugs like moisture. They're eating your residue up, but also we've got high temperatures, keeping those guys working. They're out in the Midwest where they have 4 to 5% organic matter, their ground's frozen. That microbial activity, they take a few months off. They're not digesting all that organic matter out there. That's why they're using big disc harrows and they got a bunch of corn stalks. Here, we can digest all of our, even in a high yield environment in the coastal plain, all those corn stalks you see in those fields, they can be gone in a matter of about 2 months during the summer on a good healthy soil. The bugs are actually digesting all that material. And that's important to these growers because they're getting nutrients out of that. And they're starting to take advantage of it. So some of the keys to soil health is keeping the ground covered, minimizing disturbance, keeping a living root, and a diversity of plants. I'm going to touch on some of these here in just a second. Part of your issue as a grazer, if you have animals, is to know when this grass needs to rest. And some of you may not have the ability to rest grass, and that's a big problem when you're looking at grazing management, but it's also a big problem when we're talking about soils. When you start removing top growth, you get up to over 50% of the leaf being removed by the animal or the hay cutter, this root growth stops. So in a continuous graze situation where the animals are in the pasture all the time, they clip the top of the plant off. That's that plant's solar panel. If it doesn't have it, it can't survive. So it's got to collect sunlight, right? So it's going to put on the leaf, stop the root growth for a time being, put back on the leaf. Now it starts to grow the root again. Well, guess what? There comes that cow, goat, horse, whatever again, clips it back off, it stops the root growth. Well, then you move into drought and it doesn't have a root. That's why my pasture may turn brown before your neighbor's is still halfway green. He or she may have a better root system on their plants than you do. And it's all back to grazing. How much are you taking off and how much time are you giving those plants to rest? Very important. So, this is your quiz for today. What is the most important element in the soil for agricultural production? And I'll give you a hint. It has to do with soil fertility, and you haven't ever seen it on a soil test. What would you have said if I didn't say that? What's the most important element? If you had to put something on your fields, what would it be?
Nitrogen.
Nitrogen, okay. Any other comments? That's what I would have said too. Some people maybe lime, but that's not really an element, but I guess calcium is. But anyway, it's actually, without further ado, there's potash, nitrogen, phosphorus, but it's actually carbon. Carbon is the most important element in any crop system. Corn, tomatoes, your grass in your pasture, your hay fields, carbon is the backbone of this. Why? Because these microbes feed on carbon. They don't eat nitrogen, they don't eat phosphorus, and they don't eat potash. But the bugs do, and that is a huge issue. Plants take in what? What do they take in out of the atmosphere?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. What do they release?
Oxygen.
Okay. Carbon dioxide is CO2. It's releasing O2, right? Oxygen gas. The carbon is going into the soil profile to feed the bugs. What's the bugs giving the plant? Nutrients. See, those front row people, they pay attention. Thank you. So, this is just to give you a visual of what carbon looks like. This is a root pit, and I'll have to give Clemson Extension credit. This is one of their county agents was doing a root dive demonstration, but when she got done with this pit, I said, wait a minute, I want to take a closer look at this. And I'm not a soils person. Dr. Quisenberry, does anybody know him? Been here from Clemson? Okay, you may have had his class. I had to confess to him that I slept through most of my soils classes. I paid for that for this job because I had to go back and relearn this. This is carbon moving down into the soil profile in the sand in the coastal plain. Most people you talk to say you can't get soil down into the soil profile. You can't get carbon down into that sand. This is it right here. Farmers are already doing it. Researchers maybe tell you you can't. But my point here is this is carbon, and this is what it looks like. So it's a dark color, and it's moving down a soil profile. You can do it with plants. Plants are the backbone of this whole talk. These are actually old decomposed cover crop roots, or decomposed soybean roots, or decomposed corn roots. It's a crop field. But once they die, they're leaving that carbon behind. These rhizobium are also bacteria that provide a benefit of nutrients to your soil. So I mentioned carbon is really important. Somebody said nitrogen. I'd like to get my nitrogen from organic sources, plants, clovers, Lespedezas. These little nodules right here are bacteria that attach to that plant and help it, quote, fix nitrogen. And when is most of this nitrogen released? When the plant dies. I used to think if you had it growing right beside it, it was leaking it out. It does leak out a little bit. It sloughs a few leaves off. But most of that nitrogen is released once that plant dies. So you're growing a little soybean plant, it's really going to release the plant to the nitrogen to that other plant when it dies. Cation exchange capacity, when we're talking about nutrients, if you don't know what that is, that just means that the higher number you have, the more parking spots you have for nutrients. So I want a high CEC, and you can get this on your soil test. If you want to compare what your stuff is. Down where we are in coastal plains, sand, it might be around a 2. 5, if we're lucky. Y'all starting out at a 5. So y'all are at a greater advantage. But when you look at organic matter, look at that, 100 to 300. So organic matter is important because it holds nutrients. And it holds it in a form that the rain, our 50 inches that we get, you can't leach it away. It's still there for plant root. Yeah.
When you mentioned that the nitrogen fixers, when they die, it releases the nitrogen. What about the perennial nitrogen fixers? When do they release?
They're going to leach some out of the roots. They're also going to leach as some leaves start to fall off.
Okay,
so I mean, the plant is senescent, it's losing a leaf here and there. So it's leaking some, but the majority of it is going to be when that plant actually dies, or the frost hits it and it starts to shut down. A lot of leaves fall off. I guess you're referring to like a ladino clover, or something like that.
Yeah, or even a tree.
Well,
Black
tree.
locust.
I don't know. Okay. I guess when some of those leaves may fall off that tree, it would be released. I haven't really thought about that. That's a good question. But most of the time, the perennials, they're going to lose some leaves, even like a ladino clover in a pasture. We're saying we're growing it for nitrogen or we're growing it for forage quality, but it's going to leak out some slow. It's just not going to be a greater volume as if you killed that plant and then it all released. So you may be getting a small percentage as the growing season goes. Do you have a question for that?
No.
He was just waking up. To give you an idea of what organic matter can do, this is a organic farm there in Columbia. It's right behind the stadium where the Coops play. And sorry, Gamecocks. And they have a real sandy soil there. This is a urban environment. This is probably an old warehouse sitting here one day. They've gone in and put some organic matter out in the form of compost. They've also used some animal manures. I think they used chicken litter. And they had built this soil up, and basically they haven't had any nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash in 5 years. But they still managed to produce 20,000 pounds of produce on an acre and a half in 2014, last year. That's amazing. If you look at the Clemson book, it says in order to grow beets, broccoli, eggplant, whole beans, a lot of your common vegetables, you need 120 pounds of nitrogen. They didn't put any out. How could that be? No way, right? But that organic matter and those microbes are providing that food, and they also grow a lot of plants that are providing that. They kill the clover, that clover releases nitrogen, and these cash crop is there to pick that up. So I just wanted to show you the power of plants and improving the soils of what it can do for you. We're also doing this in row crop agriculture. Corn, wheat, soybeans, all the above. Cotton, peanuts. Peanuts don't really need nitrogen, but anyhow, you get the picture. So this kind of leads me into the next thing here. If you're in a pasture situation, most of your nutrients are being recycled by the animal. 90% is returned to the soil. So if you're having to fertilize your pastures a lot, I would tell me something about your grazing system. Where are those nutrients going? If they're not being returned to the soil, where are they going? Are they washed into the creek? Are they all piled up under the shade tree? Because if those cows in the summertime are grazing in the field and they're going to the shade or the creek, getting in the creek, that's the better one, and they're pooping there, you're removing nutrients and putting them down there where the trees can get them, right? So spreading that manure around, we promote dragging pastures and stuff like that, and rotating livestock to keep those manure piles spread. You're spreading fertilizer when you're moving those animals around. We shouldn't be removing a lot of nutrients, again, when you're grazing animals. We talk about the physical properties when we talk about improving soil health. Has anybody ever used one of these? It's a aerator. A few heads nodding. This looks a lot like this to me. And they use this to build roads, right? So we want you to use your animals. We want you to use plants to help break that compaction. Plants fix soil. Steel is a temporary solution. Yeah, I can rip a big slice in the ground, but it's 50 inches of rain, it's going to compact back, right? You put a couple animals out there and it's really going to compact back. Or if you've got a vegetable operation and it's you did, it's going to really compact back. If you put these roots down, it's like a sponge, it can't compact back. Remember that plants are your solution when you're looking at soil compaction, not the aerator. Soil structure, I mentioned those crumbs earlier. This is a visual indicator. You pull back your surface layer and this is, I know, brown dirt, and y'all are in clay, you'll still have these aggregates. You'll have these little crumbs on the surface. That's a good sign. Those bugs are making those crumbs. That's pore space. You get a rain, that water can soak into that soil. It's like a dry kitchen sponge. As soon as you put a drop of water on it, it soaks it right up. Does anybody know what caused these holes? That's a good one. Dung beetles, he said. Anybody else?
Cicadas.
Cicadas, anybody else? Going once?
Oh, daikon.
Daikon radish. So when I said plants can fix soils, look at these holes. That was in a crop field. The guy planted a cover crop, and I went out there and pulled the cover back, and I said, what are these holes? I was asking the same question. What is that? Frost had killed the radish and left that giant hole right there. Well, when you get a rain, guess where that water's gone? Y'all are in some pretty hilly country up here. You want to catch as much water as you can. It's not going to do you any good in the creek. You need to keep it in the pasture for drought tolerance. There's also a lot of nutrients right there where that radish dissolved. That's what it looks like when it's growing in the field. It actually puts on a lot of top growth. And one guy told me, he said, my ground is really compact. He said, I planted those radishes and they just grew up. They couldn't even go down to the soil. And I said, that's their characteristics, but they store a lot of nutrients above the ground. And that's why they're more susceptible to frost, because that growing point is off the surface. So don't think if you ever try these, that just because it's growing out the top means that he thought it hit a point and it started going up instead of going down. Which, I mean, I can see that. We've all probably seen this situation. You got water, heavy rain, you get a summer shower, an inch of rain falls at one time and it all runs off. Up here you may see situations where you have a pond, where your neighbor has a pond. At one time, when we used to fish, it held water. Now it doesn't. What happened? Well, this is a 4-inch rain overnight. This is a 39-acre watershed, meaning that's 39 acres is draining into this pond. It's got some water in it. Same situation with a 55-acre watershed, meaning it's got more area to drain water, and there's no water in that pond. What happened?
Going into the ground?
Went into the ground. Same rain, it just soaked into the ground as opposed to running down into the pond. So I've seen some ponds, you know, you go around, they say, well, that pond used to have water, and I think somebody drilled a well over here and pulled all the water out. No, maybe, but I doubt it. Probably more to do with the land treatment around that area. You know, somebody used to graze that pasture, and now they let it grow up in the hayfield or woods. And that pond was designed by NRCS based on grazing, now it's woodland. So there's not as much runoff. We use fancy coefficients.
So you don't want to improve your soil if you like to fish in the pond?
Well, if you want brown water in your pond, you just keep continuous grazing. We can fix it. We can work with both of them. This is a little demonstration we do, and I think they're going to have a meeting. When is it? April? I'm putting a plug in for your meeting, sorry. And we'll probably have this up here, we will, to demonstrate it. But we do different land treatments. These front jars catch the water from runoff. These back jars catch infiltration. And believe it or not, an overgrazed pasture situation, this is a coastal plain, y'all, sand. We still get a lot of runoff. This blew my mind when we did this. I said, this thing will work. We want it to work. We want to show runoff for effect. But I said, this is sand and this is open pasture. We don't ever have any runoff on pasture. Look at that dirty water right there, and that's Bermuda grass, by the way. Still had a lot of runoff, and this is a tilled Cecil. So this is y'all's red Piedmont dirt. It works very well, by the way, because it's red. It shows up very well. We like these in y'all's soil down there. And this is represents a managed pasture, and you get very little runoff. And what runoff you do get is pretty clear. So this has been a real eye-opener for NRCS. We write a lot of conservation plans, and we thought that if we could get you to put that field in grass, there was no more problems. And that may not be the case, because not only is there soil in here, but there's nutrients in there. Cow pies, urine, stuff like that. So managing for soil biology, reduce the disturbance of the grazing, improve plant diversity, and let it rest. Keep it covered, keep that ground covered. I'm gonna do it on time. We got a few more minutes, 5 minutes. I haven't seen anybody sleeping yet. Start nodding off, I'll quit. Just to give you an idea of what we're doing in crop fields, and this will work for your garden as well. And I put this color in here just to show you how high that material is. You take a closer look. When I talk about plant diversity, this ground has seen corn and soybeans for the last, I don't know how many years, 50 years. All of a sudden we're putting vetch, radish, turnips, crimson clover, rye in there, stimulating that soil biology. These farmers are feeding livestock. Y'all are feeding above ground livestock. They're feeding below ground livestock because they see the benefits. We're doing this on 1% slopes or less, flat land. We're not concerned about erosion. So my point here is y'all have even greater advantage or greater reason up here to do coverage. You're getting erosion benefit, you're also getting the soil biology benefit, improving the soils. So all this material here is we're trying to feed the bugs, trying to stay ahead of that, then breaking all that material down. And that's where you start to see this. That pan on the right is that gentleman that grew that cover. Now he also uses litter. He uses a carbon source. Those of you that are using litter, that's a good carbon source. It's low in salt. It's very friendly to the microbes. Remember I told you carbon is real important? That litter combined with these plants is what generated that soil. We manufactured that soil with plants. This is what it looks like when we plant it. And then it makes a nice mulch bed there. Very good weed suppression, keeps the ground cool. So we're getting above ground benefits, but we're also feeding the pathology. By the way, any idea how much, if those that pay people in the room, how many tons of material do you think that is dry matter? Roughly. What would you guess that would be? Per acre. 20 tons, I heard. Anybody else? Everybody's scared to take a guess. Come on.
50.
5,000 pounds? 5 tons?
5 tons.
5 tons? It's in between, that's about 8, we actually measured that this year, and that was about 9 tons, so, of dry matter. The rye gives you the above ground growth, but we got all that mid-story clover, Austrian winter peas, radish, usually the winter kills the last few years. So we've got a lot, that's a tremendous amount of material. You do a tissue analysis on that, it's about 3% nitrogen, and it's about the same potash. We're taking that off our nutrient budget for a crop. We're not writing the big checks to the fertilizer company. We're writing the check to the seed. Sorry for the fertilizer guys if you're in here. But the farmers are taking advantage of that. They're spending the money on seed, but they got to take it out of their budget somewhere. Not to mention weed suppression. We're trying to cut. We got big weed problems down there. And I don't know if you garden, but that's your arch nemesis is a weed, right? So we're using that mulch. We're growing our own mulch. We're mulching fields on a large scale. You can do it on a small scale.
So there you're chopping and planting on top of that, or cutting and planting right on top of that?
We're rolling it down,
Okay.
and planting right into it.
Okay.
So how does that apply to pastures? Well, the same thing. If you leave open spaces in your pastures, you're going to have weeds. Not to say you won't have a weed if you don't have any open spaces, but weeds need sunlight. This is an example of lamb's quarter, but huge weed problem, not really friendly to cattle. But if you stop cattle in there, they'll eat it. They'll graze it. Just giving you some ideas on here. So what can you do? This is a cow, by the way. It's sorghum Sudan. Can you see him down there? The way we leave stuff on top is we want to take half and leave half. We want to leave some material on top. We're leaving it there for the bugs. We're leaving it there for weed suppression. We're leaving it there for erosion. We're leaving it there for a lot of reasons. Another thing you can do is feed hay back on your hay field. Don't transport those nutrients off to your pasture. Bring them back and feed those animals. If you're close by to your hay field and you got it fenced, feed the stuff you cut back on there. Plus, remember you're getting that urine and that manure, 90% of it. You just lost 10% of your nutrients, not all of them. Add legumes to your pastures and hay fields, rest them, and then try to get another plant in your pasture. You've got grass, Bermuda grass or fescue, and you sow oats every year, or you sow rye every year, whatever your favorite is. That's a grass and a grass. Guess what? If you put a crimson clover in there, a ladonna clover, a radish, turnip, a broadleaf plant in there, it will go bananas. The cows will like it, and your soil biology will like it. And you'll see your soil start to improve. You'll see your actual perennial grasses start to do better once that biology wakes up and it's restored. Mother Nature doesn't like a monoculture. I grew up with hay, coastal Bermuda. You don't want any weeds out there, right? But they're coming. Mother Nature's going to put them there. But if you could add a clover or something in there, this is another example of high biomass. If you've got fescue problem, you're renovating a pasture and you want to get rid of it, plant a summer annual in there. Raise that stuff down and leave. Look at what we're leaving for the bugs. We're keeping the ground cool. We don't have any weeds out here. This is a great way to not lose any pasture and also improve soil biology. There's another picture of what the ground should look like when you get done with it. High stock density, put the animals in there together, make them trample some down, make them feed the bugs. That urine, they trample that plant material down in the ground, it's going to really stimulate the soil. This is from grazing specialist Philip Brown in Georgia. I'm almost done, I promise. Bermuda grass, warm season. Frost kills it in the winter and just sits there all winter long. They're starting to put vetch, rye, and oats, turnips, radish, mixed species in this Bermuda grass during the winter. They're getting high volumes and they're also able to graze that material. It might scare you to death. You think, man, that's bloat all day long. Put a bale of hay out there, give them some roughage. Don't turn them in there hungry, but actually vetch doesn't cause bloating like some of the clovers do. But we learn in the hard way. We always do. It's the best way I learn. I make mistakes, but you put a grass in here, reduce that. You don't want a monoculture again of anything. put more rye in there, give them a grass to eat with that veg, that's a much better choice for the cows or sheep, whatever, goats, whatever you have out there. Sorry, I'm referring to cows. I'm not meaning to be biased. That's just what I'm used to talking about. Sorry. So with that, I'm gonna stop. I'll take any questions. Remember this: plants fix the soil. If you've got a problem, nutrient problem, whatever it may be, look at plants as an option. There's situations where yes, you need lime, yes, you need some potash. I'm not saying that, but this is a good ration. Manure, crop residue, that's what the bugs want. And with that, I'm gonna quit. One other thing I did, had the opportunity to go to North Dakota last year. I just want to show you what they're doing up there. These are radishes that are in the snow, and the animals are still going out there grazing this stuff. The way they used to do things, and again, part of this talk is getting you to think about your grazing or your management of your grass and your soils in a different perspective. The way we always did it may not be exactly the right way. They were calving in the winter months, January, I believe. They like that because they pull their animals up to the barn. They can watch the mamas. They don't have to go look for them, and it worked real well. Well, the problem with that was they had a lot of disease, a lot of vet bills. Sorry to the vet in the room. But they were all in manure and urine, and they were all piled up together. They started feeding their hay out on their hay fields and putting, I have a picture of it, but they were piling hay bales up for windbreaks, and the cows were actually grazing back out there where they just cut the hay from. They used to cut the hay and haul it up to the barn. Put all their nutrients at the barn, all the cows at the barns, all the calves. Well, the fix to that was change their calving season. All they did was change their calving season to the spring after the winter months were gone. So now these mamas were grazing this material, and this is in October. Up there, that's like our probably December, and it's still great nutrient quality, but they just changed their calving day. So now they're not looking for calves in the snow. They're looking for them in the spring when they got the best grass, and they just changed their operation. Now they said their vet bills have gone down. They don't have that mess they used to have up there at the barn. Have the winter, they leave the animals out there on the pasture. So don't think that you're in a microclimate here in South Carolina or Greenville County, you know, can't change things, because we can, and we can improve our soils. Yes, ma'am?
Is it better, or have y'all determined whether it's better to broadcast, depending on your soil, or no-till seeds?
If you're broadcasting, you're gonna need to graze it down really tight before you do that, and kind of drag it or something. But no-tilling is obviously the best. You could also scratch it with, I know I was talking about tillage, but if you just scratch the surface with it lightly, that's not real invasive. But anything to get that seed soil contact. The smaller the seed, the less dirt you have to have on it. So if you're trying a radish, it's about the size of a BB. It's a little bit bigger than like a clover would be. So clover is like the size of a grain of sand. You don't have to have it. It can probably stand being on the surface. So it depends. But I would rather have the drill if I had to do it.
Just watch if you're doing something like clothes, just not getting it in too deep.
I was thinking of the radishes because it does the soil, gets down so deep. Would you
Radishes
broadcast
need to be
those?
planted early, and because they can winter field. So up here, you know, into August, you can plant them pretty early actually. But you know, you're getting kind of late right now for radish. Not to say don't try it, but I don't want you to be disappointed. You spend the money on the seed, you don't have to drill, you're in it, and then along comes a hard freeze at Christmas, and they're that big.
Yeah.
I don't want to mislead you.
NRC has still written no-till drill like they used to.
You have one again?
I think it's counted.
Livestock assessment.
Some of the conservation districts do, Greenville is not.
I think it does too.
Yeah.
So some of them do. You need to drill. And most of these mixes, you don't have to have a small seed box. If you've got a regular old, a conventional grain drill or any kind of planter, you can really mix these seeds together and plant it with that. You know, you mentioned that. You just have to get it, scratch it in. We get a fair amount of rain here too. That helps. Planting earlier the better, and having it grade down. Yes, sir.
talk about not taking over 50% of your cover off at a time. What about aphids, when you cut them in the maize? And if you take it down, and then the droughts hit, and I throw cattle in there in the fall, and stuff doesn't stand a chance.
Hay is a hard animal because you're taking all the nutrients out. You're fighting the system, so you need to make sure your potash is probably one of the most important. We tend to focus on nitrogen, having potash in there for cold hardiness, and also, but maybe, I know this later in the season, when I last cut it, maybe I'm cutting it a little bit higher, especially when I'm grading. Or putting that, plants on there in the fall. Yeah, that's a tough situation.
Leave a little taller stubble, it seems to really start to bring mine back quicker. Particularly if you,
Not cutting as close.
not cutting quite as close, even with Bermuda, but particularly with fescue where it's got the crown, definitely, leave a little bit.
We've been doing that, and it does help.
It helps too with soil temperature. When we have a cover on the ground, even in July and August, air temperature will be 98 degrees. That ground is over 100. And I don't know how, because again, it's what I know. That ground temperature is over 100 degrees when it's no cover. And we have any type of residue, it's generally about 80 to 85 degrees, 15 to 20 degrees cooler, where you have some cover. And that, and just that stubble will help with weeds, it'll help with keeping that ground cooler. I don't know about y'all, but if you go down to the beach and you walk on the bare sand, the plant roots can't stand that. They don't like that high heat. And the microbes don't either. 100 degrees, you start to get over 120 degrees when they shut down. So, all of it is all related. And those soils can get over 100.
Did they say the first cutting or every cutting leave it higher?
I would encourage you to leave it higher on every cut. Because you scalp your yard. I don't know if you cut grass in your yard, you scalp that grass and see how long it takes to come back. That kind of thing. So the same concept with potatoes. You can leave it a little taller. It'll help. I think you would offset it. You're not going to lose that much volume by leaving it a couple inches tall.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's give Gordon a big round of applause.